Picture this. Two astronauts are floating outside a space station, doing some repairs in their spacesuits. They're literally just 2 meters apart. They can see each other perfectly, but they cannot hear a single word the other is saying. Even if they scream at the top of their lungs, total silence. Why? Because in space, there's absolutely no sound. None.
And by the end of this explainer, you're going to know exactly why that is. Plus, we're going to uncover 3 other wild facts about sound that surprised even Class 9 toppers. We are going to solve this whole astronaut mystery by digging straight into the actual physics of how sound works, relying entirely on the concepts from your NCERT Chapter 10 syllabus. So here's what we're covering today. You're going to walk away confidently understanding how sound is actually produced in the first place, how it travels through different materials, why it absolutely cannot travel through outer space, what its key properties are, like wavelength, frequency, and amplitude, and how all of this is used in some incredible real-world technology, from ancient architecture all the way to submarine detection.
To get us there, here is our roadmap. Number 1, creation and travel. Number 2, wave anatomy. Number 3, real-world physics. Number 4, the exam application. And finally, number 5, exam traps and next steps.
All right, let's dive right into this. Part 1, creation and travel.
The fundamental rule of this entire chapter, the one thing you really need to remember, is this. All sound is produced by vibration. When an object vibrates, it makes a sound. The exact second that vibration stops, the sound stops. Your textbook actually illustrates this brilliantly with Activity 10.1. Imagine stretching a rubber band over an open cardboard box and giving it a pluck. You don't just hear a twang, you can literally see the band vibrating. It becomes this rapid, blurry to and fro motion. And the millisecond you pinch that rubber band and force it to stay still, the sound completely vanishes. This one simple experiment proves our core rule. Vibration, which is just the periodic to and fro motion of an object, is the universal source of all sound. No exceptions. And it's so fascinating to see how this applies to living creatures. Like, how do you and I create sound? Well, inside your throat, in the larynx or voice box, you have these vocal cords. When you decide to speak, muscles pull those cords tight, and the air rushing up from your lungs forces them to vibrate. Boom, that vibration is your voice. Animals do this too, but sometimes in totally wild ways. Grasshoppers and crickets, they don't even have vocal cords. They literally rub their wings or their legs together to create vibrations. So that beautiful, peaceful sound of a countryside night is actually just the rapid friction of insect body parts. This also brilliantly illustrates the sheer variety of ways we can force things to vibrate. Think about classical Indian musical instruments. They're basically masterclasses in physics. The sitar produces its distinct, sharp twang because you're vibrating plucked metal strings. The tabla, on the other hand, creates those deep, resonant beats through a stretched membrane that you strike with your hands. And then you have the bansuri, the Indian flute, which works by vibrating a column of air inside a hollow bamboo pipe. 3 completely different methods: strings, membranes, and air columns. But every single one of them relies on that exact same universal principle, vibration. So, okay, we know how sound is made, but how does it actually reach our ears? Well, sound needs a medium to travel. A medium is literally just the physical material that sound propagates or travels through, and that can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. If you put your ear flat on a solid wooden desk and your friend gently taps the other end, you hear it perfectly, right? That's the solid wood carrying the vibration. Dolphins communicate underwater because the liquid water is carrying the sound, and when we're just standing around talking to each other normally, the gas in the air is our medium. Here is the critical takeaway. Sound requires a material medium. It absolutely needs physical particles to bump into one another to pass that vibration along, like a microscopic relay race. And this is exactly why our 2 astronauts couldn't hear each other at the start of this explainer. Outer space is a vacuum. There's almost no air, no gas, no solid, no liquid. That means there are no particles to bump into each other. So it doesn't matter if they're screaming right at each other, the sound has absolutely nothing to travel through. It can't propagate. This is exactly why real astronauts use radio headsets inside their helmets. Radio waves are a totally different kind of wave that can travel through a vacuum, but mechanical sound waves, no chance. Mystery solved. Let's move on to part 2, wave anatomy. So what does a sound wave actually look like up close? When an object vibrates, it shoves the air particles right next to it, crowding them all together. We call this crowded, high-density area a compression.
As the vibrating object pulls back the other way, it creates a spread-out, low-density area called a rarefaction. Sound travels outward as a continuous, alternating series of these compressions and rarefactions. Now, if you take that changing particle density and plot it on a graph, it forms that classic wave shape you see right there. The highest points, the peaks, those are your compressions. The lowest points, the valleys, those are your rarefactions.
What's really interesting about this slide is how we can map this totally abstract graph directly onto the real sounds we hear every day, using just two key properties. First up is wavelength. This is simply the horizontal distance between two consecutive compressions, so the length of one complete wave. Wavelength directly controls the pitch of the sound. A really short wavelength means a high, squeaky pitch, like a referee's whistle. The second property is amplitude. This is the vertical height of the wave from that center line all the way to the peak. Amplitude represents the maximum disturbance of the particles, and it directly controls loudness. A taller wave means a louder, booming sound, like thunder.
All right, part 3, real-world physics.
Did you know sound waves can bounce off hard surfaces, just like light bouncing off a mirror? This is called reflection, and it's what creates an echo. But think about it. You don't hear an echo every single time you speak in your bedroom or a classroom. Why? Well, it all comes down to the number 17. For your brain to hear an echo clearly as a totally distinct sound separate from your original shout, the reflecting surface has to be at least 17 meters away. You see, it takes the human brain 0.1 seconds to distinguish two separate sounds. Given the speed of sound in air, the total round trip for the wave has to be 34.4 meters. So the wall has to be exactly half that distance away, a minimum of 17.2 or roughly 17 meters. And what's amazing is how ancient architects mastered this acoustic physics long before modern textbooks existed. India actually has one of the world's most spectacular examples of acoustic reflection, the Whispering Gallery inside Gol Gumbaz in Bijapur, Karnataka. This enormous, magnificent dome is designed with such precise mathematical geometry that multiple reflections of sound travel all the way across the gallery. A faint, tiny whisper spoken at one end can be heard crystal clear at the exact opposite end, dozens of meters away. It's a massive, breathtaking real-world application of sound reflection.
Now, obviously, we use reflection in modern tech too, like sonar, where ships bounce ultrasonic waves off the ocean floor to find submarines. But keeping it closer to home, the science of acoustics has incredibly deep roots in India. Take Sir C.V. Raman. You probably know he won India's first Nobel Prize in Science for his work on light, but he was also a massive acoustics nerd. He intensely studied the physics behind the rich, complex sounds of Indian percussion instruments. He actually mathematically proved how that special black patch in the center of a tabla or mridangam allows it to produce such nuanced, multi-layered harmonies.
Grab your notebooks because here is part 4, the exam application.
I want to walk you through this because it's pretty much a guaranteed board exam concept. This is straight from NCERT Example 10.3, the classic lightning and thunder problem. The problem goes like this. During a thunderstorm, you see a flash of lightning and exactly 5 seconds later you hear the thunder. How far away did the lightning strike? Assume the speed of sound is 340 meters per second. The logic here is so cool. Light travels at an insane 300,000 kilometers per second. So for distances here on Earth, you basically see the lightning flash instantly. But sound? Sound is sluggish. It only moves at about 340 meters per second. So that 5-second delay you experience is purely the time it took the sound wave to travel from the strike all the way to your ear. To solve it, we just use the easiest formula in physics. Distance equals speed multiplied by time. We take the speed of 340, multiply it by the time of 5 seconds, and we get 1,700 meters, which is exactly 1.7 kilometers. Boom! The lightning struck 1.7 kilometers away. Practice this exact setup, guys. You will absolutely see time delay problems like this in your exams.
And that brings us to part 5, exam traps and next steps. Okay, putting on my protective older sibling hat for a second, I need to make sure you do not lose silly marks on these 3 very common mistakes. Trap number 1, the particle movement confusion. A lot of students wrongly write that air particles actually travel with the sound wave, flying from the speaker all the way across the room into your ear. They don't. The particles only oscillate or wiggle in place. What travels through the room is the disturbance, the energy. The actual particles just bump their neighbors and stay roughly exactly where they started. Trap number 2, forgetting to have the echo distance. In an echo math problem, the sound travels to the wall and back to you. If an echo takes 2 seconds to return, that's the round trip time. You always have to divide the final distance by 2 to find how far away the wall is. Don't forget that. Trap number 3, graph confusion. Remember this clearly. Wavelength is the horizontal distance and it controls pitch. Amplitude is the vertical height and it controls loudness. Do not mix them up on test day.
So let's see if you've really mastered the math here. I've got a challenge for you. Imagine you're standing exactly 3 kilometers away when a bolt of lightning strikes. After how many seconds would you hear the thunder? Again, use the speed of sound as 340 meters per second. Grab a pen, do the calculation, and drop your answer down in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm going to pin the first correct response. Let's see who gets it.
In our next explainer, we're moving right along to your next syllabus topic, Class 9 Science, Chapter 11, Reproduction. We are going to explore how living things pass life from one generation to the next, the crucial differences between asexual and sexual reproduction, and one totally surprising fact about plants that almost every Class 9 student gets wrong on their final. The link to that will be right down in the description, so make sure you don't miss it. If this explainer helps you finally wrap your head around sound waves, stick around. We're going to keep systematically breaking down the entire science syllabus, chapter by chapter, making it highly visual and easy to digest. Until then, keep observing the amazing world around you, and I will see you in Chapter 11.